Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris, and I've got my calendar, and I am a couple days behind, so I'm looking for today's the 15th, so we're going to drink the 14th beer, and we're going to pretend like that's where I was supposed to be. Alright, we're going to play pretend for this video. Oh, okay. Pumpkin spice ale. I mean, that's the best one I've had. This is Japan Attacks Everywhere. And it was very impressive on the last one. So now they're attacking everywhere. So we've already discussed, I hit my nose in my sleep with my thumb. So we're moving past that now. I'm okay. Little rehab, little recovery, some therapy, a little bit of farting, but I'm good. Video.
As the rising sun expanded across East Asia, the United States Pacific Fleet laid broken in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor. The British colonies had also been invaded, suffering defeat after defeat, both in Hong Kong and in the Malayan Peninsula. But this would not be the end of the Japanese aggression, as the strategic American possessions in the Pacific were now up for grabs. Today we're going to cover the initial landings in the Philippines, as well as the attacks against Guam and Wake Island. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges the world is facing right now, and an issue that the Kings and Generals channel considers to be of utmost importance. We all together. As we've already seen, the United States had neglected the defences of its Pacific possessions for too many years since their victory in the Great War. And with the Japanese threat approaching like dark clouds on the horizon, the effort to prepare for a new war was still minimal, leading to a considerable weakness for the American forces in the Pacific. In July of 1941, after the Japanese occupation of southern Indochina, the USAFFE was formed, including both American and Filipino forces in the region, with Lieutenant General Douglas MacArthur as its commander-in-chief. The Philippine Army had thousands of troops, but it lacked modern weapons, adequate training, and valuable experience, something MacArthur set out to correct from the get-go, even though he wouldn't have the time to complete his task. The US Navy also had a small presence in the region with the old Asiatic Fleet of Admiral Thomas Hart, which is not to be confused with the Pacific Fleet based in Hawaii. This fleet depended on a few cruisers and World War I era destroyers, although it featured a considerable submarine squadron as well, albeit not big enough to successfully struggle against the Japanese. The Asiatic Fleet was also responsible for the defense of Guam, while the defense of Wake Island was under the jurisdiction of Admiral Husband Kimmel's Pacific Fleet. In the Philippines, MacArthur counted some 22,532 men, including one fully American regiment, 3 well-trained regiments of Philippine Scouts, 2 tank battalions, 10 inexperienced Philippine divisions, and considerable coastal and anti-aerial artillery. MacArthur also had at his disposal the Far East Air Force, under the command of Major General Louis Brereton, totaling some 218 modern aircraft, as well as the Philippine Air Corps' 6 squadrons of obsolete aircraft. A very sizable air force to stem the Japanese offensive. In Guam, although the US didn't think that the island could be successfully defended, naval forces were under the command of Captain George McKillen, counting with some 271 Navy personnel, as well as 153 Marines, led by Lieutenant Colonel William McNulty, and some 246 volunteers of the Guam Insular Force Guard. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, Admiral Kimmel had noticed the valuable strategic importance of Wake Island since the start of the year, ordering the construction of naval base facilities with the objective of turning it into a stronghold, something that wouldn't be completed by the end of 1941. Kimmel had the 1st Defense Battalion of Marine units for the defense of the American islands in the Pacific, with the other 3 battalions assigned to Midway and Hawaii. 2 detachments were sent to the Johnston and Palmyra Islands, while the rest of the battalion remained at Pearl Harbor. On August 8th, a new detachment of the 1st Defense Battalion was sent to Wake, totaling some 422 Marines under the command of Major James Devereaux. In late November, the defense of Wake was placed under the command of Winfield Cunningham, while the defenders would be reinforced with the VMF 211 Squadron of Major Paul Putnam, consisting of 12 F-4F-3 Wildcat fighters. As for the Japanese, limited by the war in China and the attacks against the British and Dutch colonies, they could only count on 2 divisions and a brigade for their offensives against the American possessions in the Pacific. The rest of the hard work would have to be carried out by the IJN and their Special Naval Landing Force, the Japanese equivalent to the US Marines. For the invasion of the Philippines in particular, Tokyo had planned to first neutralize the American air forces in the Philippines to have full control of the air. To do this, they would also need to execute several amphibious invasions against the main American northern airfields to extend Japanese aircraft capabilities. Once air superiority was assured, they would launch their main amphibious assault against Luzon and Mindanao, then advancing across the Philippines to occupy their vital strategic locations. The 14th Army of Lieutenant General Homa Masaharu, consisting of the 16th and 48th Divisions, as well as the 65th Independent Mixed Brigade and 2 tank regiments, was appointed to carry out this operation, and they would be supported by the 5th Army Air Force Division of Lieutenant General Obata Hideyoshi, consisting of 183 short-range aircraft. The Japanese also appointed Vice Admiral Takahashi Ibo's 3rd Fleet to support the invasion of the Philippines, primarily showcasing a variety of cruisers and destroyers, and providing some 358 valuable long-range aircraft in the form of the 11th Air Fleet. Takahashi's role in the Philippines was to destroy the Asiatic fleet, cover and support the naval landings, and then protect Japanese supply lines and reinforcements. Meanwhile, the 4th Fleet of Vice Admiral Inoue Shigeyoshi was selected to conduct operations against the islands of the Pacific Ocean, including the invasions of Wake and Guam. For the attack on Wake Island, Inoue planned to conduct 3 days of aerial bombardment, followed by naval landings on Wilkes Island and Wake proper. The invasion force, designated as Comdesron 6 and commanded by Rear Admiral Kajioka Sadamichi, consisted of a covering and support force of cruisers and destroyers, 34 bombers of the 24th Air Flotilla, an occupation force, and 450 SNLF Marines. For the assault on Guam, Inoue assigned the South Seas Detachment of Major General Hori Tomitaro, mainly consisting of 4,886 men from the 144th Infantry Regiment, to support the naval.
What are you doing today to change your mood? Me? 30 minutes ago, I've taken this cannabis-infused edible.
I was going to do the splits.
To support.
So it just dawned on me that I don't think I've said anything the last 5 minutes. So I'm just going to pause right now and go, there's a lot of shit happening. And I am just glued to this like I'm watching it without this little thing right here recording. So this is where I'm going to share some things with you. There's a war going on. A lot of people are dying. A lot of things are happening. I think the scientific term of what's going on is shit's going down. I believe that's the phrase. I'm going to take a swig of beer. And video.
The naval landings on Guam, the Japanese would also appoint the 6th Cruiser Division of Rear Admiral Goto Aritomo, consisting of 4 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 370 SNLF Marines. Inoue also planned to occupy the Gilbert Islands and to conduct bombardments of the Howland and Baker Islands. For this operation, he created a supporting group under the command of Captain Miyazaki Shigetoshi, consisting of 2 mine layers, 2 destroyers and a gunboat to escort the 51st Naval Garrison Unit in its invasion of the Gilberts. At the same time, the 24th Air Flotilla was placed in charge of the bombardment of the Howland, Baker and Gilbert Islands. As we've seen, on December 2nd, the order to climb Mount Nitaka was given, setting up the final preparations for the Japanese offensives to be launched on December 8th. 3 days later, Honma's men departed Hahajima en route to Guam, with the objective of landing at Tumon Bay on the southwest coast near Merizo and on the eastern shore of Telefufo Bay. The other invasions, however, would have to wait first for the airstrikes to be successful. Around 0300 hours on December 8th, the American commanders in the Philippines were informed of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Although the US thought that the Philippines were a lost cause and only wanted to execute a limited resistance for reinforcements of the Pacific Fleet to arrive, MacArthur had planned to do a more active defense, trying to defeat the Japanese on the beaches before they could establish a foothold. Thus, he established 3 main defensive forces: the North Luzon Force of Major General Jonathan Wainwright, the South Luzon Force of Major General George Parker Jr., and the Visayan Mindanao Force of Brigadier General William Sharp. MacArthur also believed that the combined strength of the Asiatic Fleet and his air forces were capable of destroying any Japanese fleet, something Admiral Hart opposed, believing it would be best for his forces to retreat south and join a combined fleet with the British and the Dutch. General Brereton wanted to prepare a retaliatory B-17 bombing strike against Formosa in accordance with the Rainbow 5 war plan. At 0530, Chief of Staff of the US Army, General George Marshall, ordered MacArthur to execute the existing war plan, Rainbow 5, but MacArthur did nothing. General Brereton proceeded 3 times to ask permission, and was denied until he personally spoke to MacArthur at 1100, finally obtaining permission.
Why didn't MacArthur listen to him? I have a book on Douglas MacArthur, and it's called The American Caesar, and I have a feeling, thinking of that, maybe MacArthur was very into the chain of command, my ass, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm just guessing. I don't know much about him other than, and I've said this repeatedly, Douglas MacArthur's father was named Arthur MacArthur, and he fought at the battle, well, he fought in the Civil War. One of them was the Battle of Chickamauga. I'm going to burp right now, so I'm going to get back to the video.
Procrastination of a preemptive attack would cost them dearly. Meanwhile, at Wake, the American defenders were informed of the attack on Pearl Harbor around 0600, quickly rushing to man the island's defenses. 4 Wildcats were also sent to patrol around Wake, with the rest being prepared for liftoff. Around 0700, Japanese aircraft took off from Formosa, heading towards the Philippines, and then striking Tuguegarao and Baguio at 0930. At this point, Army bombers returned to Taiwan, leaving the Americans feeling like the attack was over, even though it had just begun. 34 bombers had also taken off at dawn from Roy Island towards Wake, while from Saipan, Japanese aircraft struck Guam, destroying one of their mine layers. At the same time, Japanese bombers from the Marshall Islands shelled Nauru, Howland, Baker, and the Gilbert Islands. As a result, airstrips and infrastructure on the islands were damaged, and Howland lost 2 of its 4 colonizers. Meanwhile, troop transports from the Marshalls also began to embark en route to the Gilberts. They would arrive on
Did anyone else know, outside of Japan and all the places here, did anyone else realize that Japan was this active? I mean, I didn't know about any of this. So I apologize for not talking. But I'm just hooked, because I didn't know that they were doing all of this. I see why now. The Battle of Iwo Jima, stuff like that. just the Pacific Theater was looked at as it was going to be brutal. And I can appreciate that more now because I see just how they were all over the place. They were hitting everything. I mean, their leaders, their military guys, man, they were just coming up with plans left and right, and they were just like, oh, we came up with 10 different things. Good, let's do them on the same day. All right, and you just went for it. I didn't realize that. Wow. It's just
December
blowing
9th,
my mind.
with SNLF Marines landing on Makin and Tarawa unopposed, and starting the construction of seaplane bases there. 2 days later, the Japanese would also take control of Little Makin and Bukati, completing their invasion of the Gilbert Islands. And back to the main action, Japanese Navy bombers caught the Americans unaware at 12:30, bombarding the Iba airfield and destroying a flight of P-40s and its radar station. They then headed to Clark Field, where they managed to destroy most of the American aircraft on the ground, leaving only 17 B-17s operational. By afternoon, half of the Far East Air Force was shattered, assuring Japanese air superiority for the rest of the campaign. Douglas MacArthur's procrastination of Brereton's requests cost them dearly. At the same time, Japanese bombers at Wake managed to slip through the American patrols, then bombarded the airfield and destroyed 8 Wildcats on the ground. They also struck the American camps, defenses, and seaplane facilities, causing considerable damage before returning back to the Marshall Islands. In a single day, the Japanese air forces had repeated their success at Pearl Harbor, leaving the American presence in the Pacific severely weakened. Furthermore, some 490 SNLF Marines had already landed on Bataan Island, taking control of its small airfield to further execute air operations. This convinced Admiral Hart to order the bulk of the Asiatic fleet to withdraw and join the British and the Dutch on Borneo, just as he had planned. More aerial bombardments over the remaining American airfields would follow in the next few days, destroying most of the remaining aircraft and leaving only a handful of P-40 and B-17s unscathed. Thus, MacArthur was left without naval or air forces, alone to defend the Philippines with his ground divisions. Wake and Guam were also hit again on December 9th, although this time the American defenders were prepared to brace against the Japanese attack, so they didn't suffer much damage. More air attacks would follow on December 10th, but this day would also see the first major fighting in the Pacific. Around 0200,
I don't care about that. I don't even know what it was.
Around 0200, Goto's 370 SNLF Marines landed at Agenya Bay, quickly engaging the men of the Guam Insular Force Guard and overtaking their positions with their superior firepower. They subsequently advanced towards Sume and the Marine Barracks, while Hori's South Seas Detachment landed at its objectives practically unopposed, and then started its advance across the island. Some fighting ensued on Eganya's Plaza de España, and soon Captain McKillin saw that further resistance was pointless, calling a ceasefire. Around 0600, he would finally surrender his forces, making Guam the first American territory to fall into Japanese hands. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, the situation was also very grim. At dawn, 3 surprise attack forces, carrying around 2,000 Japanese soldiers each, started their operations, with the first one landing at Apari. This was a very important target, as its airfield could allow army aircraft of the Japanese to conduct attacks all across the Philippines. Despite this, the Japanese landed unopposed and could capture Apari, Gonzaga, and Camiguin Island in a matter of hours. At the same time, the second force disembarked at Vigan, but was met with an intense B-17 and P-40 attack that forced some Japanese soldiers to retreat back to the transports. They would return the following day, landing 4 miles to the south and taking the town of Lauag, while the rest of the detachment had already secured Vigan and its airfield. MacArthur was livid when he heard about the naval landings, blaming Wainwright for his incompetence in MacArthur's planned active defense, not even offering any resistance. The last Japanese surprise force, coming from the Palau Islands, also disembarked on Legazpi unopposed on December 12th, then taking the city and its airfield. At this point, Japanese forces had also taken the Tuguegarao airfield to the south of Apari, threatening the last major American airfield at Del Monte. This prompted Brereton to ask permission for the remaining aircraft to be transferred to Darwin, Australia, and as MacArthur agreed, the remaining B-17s had escaped by December 19th. Homer then ordered his forces in the northern Philippines to concentrate at Vigan to assist the main offensive against the Lingayen Gulf, which we will cover in the future. In the meantime, we're going to return to Wake Island, where hell was going to be let loose on December 11th. Early in the morning, Kajioka's invasion force arrived in the vicinity of Wake and proceeded to take positions for the landing of his troops. He subsequently ordered to start the bombardment of the American positions on the beaches. In response, Devereux quickly ordered his forces to track their objectives and to hold their fire for the Japanese ships to get in range of their batteries. Around 0600, as Kajioka's flagship, the Yubaru, reached Peacock Point, Devereux knew that it was now or never, so he gave the command to open fire. Immediately, a rain of fire fell upon the Japanese warships. From Peacock Point, Battery A opened fire over the Yubari, hitting her 4 times on her port side.
Wow.
As Kajioka's flagship turned to starboard while engulfed in smoke, a destroyer swept in and tried to protect her, getting hit once without much damage before Kajioka's escape. At the same time, Battery L on Wilkes Island opened fire over the destroyer Hayate, hitting it 3 times. The destroyer then exploded, broke in 2, and finally sank, the first Japanese vessel to sink in the Pacific War. Battery L then targeted another destroyer.
After everything that Japan had done, let me say that again, after everything Japan had done to the Americans to that point, you know they were looking down on them. And by them, I mean me. But when this one sunk, do you think they looked at it like, okay, well, that was lucky? Or do you think they thought, okay, this might be a little bit of a battle? Because I'm thinking they're probably looking at it like, well, everyone gets lucky. And the Americans just got lucky. That's how I'm taking it. And that's probably how I would have thought it out. Just to keep my guys mentally like on top of it, mentally sharp, and just make them think, hey, look, if you're not paying attention, they can get lucky. They only need to get lucky with one shot. So, let's get after them.
Hitting it once, but at this point, most of the Japanese vessels had already gotten out of range of the American guns. Meanwhile, Battery B on Peel Island exchanged fire with 3 destroyers and 2 cruisers, giving and receiving considerable damage without major losses on either side. With the retreat of the invasion force back to the Marshall Islands, the Japanese had been defeated, although this was not the end. Major Putnam's 4 remaining Wildcats soon pounced on the retiring ships with guns blazing. They managed to explode another destroyer and severely damage 1 cruiser before the Japanese were out of range, with only one of the Wildcats receiving some damage. Yet despite the great American victory, the Japanese immediately retaliated with an air bombing run over the batteries on Peel Island, which had been pinpointed by Kajioka's forces. Devereux would then change the location of these batteries to the east end of Peel to avoid more losses. Nonetheless, this was the first time the Japanese behemoth had been stopped, and amidst the many failures the Allies had already suffered in the east, it brought hope back to the defenders in the Pacific. But this was hardly the end, as the Japanese would come back once again to take the island in the following weeks. Next week, we're going to cover the continuation of...
Wow. They are just... Japan was a beast. Not you. Not you. Or you. Neither are you two. Okay. Another video down. And we are going to call it. We're going to call it right now. Do you have something to say? Either of you have something to say? You want to contribute? Nothing? All right. All right. Well, I'm going to let these two down, and I'm going to end this video first. Okay. Well, maybe I'm not, because they're both fighting to get down. No, tell me. Okay. Well, that was a good jump. All right. I'm going to end this here, but I want you all to remember that if you don't like and subscribe, I'm going to wish for my birthday gift, my Christmas gift. I'm going to ask Santa to make you all blind